never believed paper could bleed, but the first page of Harper's notebook felt like it did. My hands shook as I read the words, each sentence carving out pieces of the friendship I thought was unbreakable. She hadn't just lied, she had planned. My best friend, the woman who stood beside me through heartbreak, marriages, funerals, and years of late-night talks, had written a confession so cruel it hollowed me out. I never wanted her happiness. Every laugh I gave her was a lie. Every hug was a shield to hide my envy. I froze, the air too heavy for my lungs. Betrayal doesn't knock. It slices, sudden and merciless, and I was left staring at a truth that burned more than any wound. I thought I knew Harper, but that night proved I never really did. My name is Elowen Price, and I am 36 years old. If you had met me 2 weeks ago, you might have said I lived an ordinary life. A decent one, even. I live in suburban Pennsylvania, in a 3-bedroom house with peeling paint but a yard that blooms beautifully every spring. I work at a community hospital as a radiology technician. Steady pay, decent benefits, nothing glamorous. People at work call me reliable, the kind of woman you can trust to cover a shift or lend you her last 20 until payday. Maybe that was true, until Harper's notebook landed in my lap and cracked that version of me wide open. Because now, every ounce of trust one had in people feels like ash. Harper was more than a friend. She was a sister I never had. We met at 19 back in college, 2 broke girls working part-time in the cafeteria, scrubbing trays and spilling coffee on ourselves as we laughed at the unfairness of it all. Harper was bold, magnetic, and fiery in ways I could never be. If I hesitated, she jumped. If I cried, she wiped the tears. People said she pulled me out of my shell, but truthfully, I think I let her build one around me. I never thought twice about her loyalty. Harper was the maid of honor at my wedding, the one who held my hair back when I got sick during chemo at 29, the one who showed up with flowers and pizza after every loss. She was stitched into my life. Till now. The notebook was small, leather-bound, and worn at the edges, like something that should have been filled with grocery lists or recipes. But the contents were venom, raw and unfiltered. She had written about moments I thought were sacred, my engagement, my recovery, my birthdays, and stripped them of sincerity. I smiled at her wedding but wanted to scream. I hated the dress she wore. I hated that she had someone who looked at her like that. Harper's jealousy wasn't just passive, it was a quiet, festering obsession. She documented it like someone might catalog crimes, except I was the target and she was the executioner waiting for her turn. I remember the night I found it as clearly as the lines etched into my face. Harper had left her bag at my house after one of our rare wine nights. We hadn't been as close lately, but she insisted we should catch up, so we did. Pizza boxes, Chardonnay, laughter that felt forced in hindsight. When she left, she forgot her bag on my couch. The next morning, rushing to work, I picked it up to return later, but the weight felt strange. Heavy. When I peeked inside, the notebook was there, staring at me like a dare. I swear I didn't mean to open it at first, but something in me pushed past guilt. And when I flipped that first page, my world collapsed. The deeper I read, the darker it became. She thinks I love her child like my own, but I don't. I hate that little girl's laugh. It reminds me that I will never have what she does. I stopped breathing. My daughter, Maisie, was only 7, and Harper had held her countless times, braided her hair, bought her Christmas gifts, kissed her forehead. To see those words in ink felt like watching poison drip into my child's cup. She didn't just resent me, she resented Maisie. That was the moment the betrayal became dangerous. It wasn't just about my pain anymore. It was about protecting the little girl I would burn the world for. I slammed the notebook shut and sat frozen on the couch, my mind spinning with questions. Why did she write this? Was it just rage on paper, or was it a warning of something worse? Had every act of kindness been a mask, every hug a rehearsed performance? Memories flashed like broken glass. The time Harper took Maisie to the park without telling me, the time she offered to babysit overnight, the way she always asked too many questions about my marriage. Each memory, once sweet, now curdled into suspicion. My chest tightened. Betrayal wasn't just about lies. It was about the possibility that I had invited danger right into my home. I told myself to stop reading, but curiosity is a cruel master. I turned the page and then another. One day she'll see me the way I want. One day she'll understand that I could have been her, if only life had been fair. Until then, I'll play the friend. My stomach lurched. This wasn't just envy. This was obsession. Harper didn't just want my life, she wanted to become me. The thought sent ice through my veins. How long had she been pretending? How many of our shared memories were real? And how many were theater in a play I didn't know I was starring in? That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Maisie snored softly in her room down the hall. Every creak in the house made me jump. Every shadow felt like Harper's presence. The betrayal had taken root so deep that even my own walls felt unsafe. By dawn I made a decision. I couldn't let Harper know I had read it. Not yet. Because if her words were true, then she was dangerous. And the only way to protect myself and Maisie was to play the same game she had played with me. Pretend. And then strike when she least expected it. Revenge wasn't just an idea anymore, it was survival. I want you to pause with me here because this is where my story truly begins. A story of betrayal that cut deeper than love, of revenge that became the only way to heal, of secrets too heavy for one heart to carry. If you've ever trusted someone who didn't deserve it, if you've ever been broken by the very person you called family, then you'll understand the fire that was lit inside me that day. My name is Elowen Price, I am 36 years old, and I found out that my best friend's love was nothing more than a mask. If you want to see how far this betrayal pushed me, and how the notebook became my weapon, make sure you subscribe and stay with me. Because what happened next will make you question every friendship you've ever had. The hardest part of betrayal isn't the sting, it's pretending you're not bleeding. When Harper called the next morning, her voice was warm and casual, the same melody I'd heard for 17 years. Elowen, did I leave my bag at your place? I swallowed the truth like poison. My chest burned as I told her yes, that I'd bring it by later. I wanted to scream down the line, to confront her, to demand why she filled pages with venom about me and my daughter. But I couldn't. Because if I exploded too soon, I'd lose the only advantage I had, knowing her secret. Harper thought I was blind, but now I was awake. And the mask she had worn for so long, it would become mine. I would play her game better than she ever imagined. Driving to her house felt like walking into a crime scene, except the evidence was tucked neatly into my purse. The streets of her neighborhood were too quiet, too clean, lined with trimmed hedges and American flags waving in the late morning breeze. I parked in front of her white two-story home, the kind of place that looked perfect on the outside, while the inside hid cracks invisible to strangers. When she opened the door, Harper smiled so brightly it made me sick. Her blonde hair was pulled into a loose bun, and she wore the sweatshirt I once gave her for her birthday. God, I thought I lost it forever, she said, taking the bag from me. But I held the notebook back, my hand refusing to release it just yet. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did, but her mask never slipped. She poured coffee like she always did when I visited, sliding a steaming mug across the table. I've missed this, she said. Us. I forced my lips into a smile and nodded, but every sip tasted bitter. My eyes drifted to her walls, pictures of us, of Maisie, of moments I thought were real. But the notebook's words crawled in my mind, tainting everything. I smiled at her wedding but wanted to scream. The memory of my wedding photo on her fridge twisted in my gut. Did she stare at it and laugh when I wasn't looking? I kept my voice calm, steady, like I hadn't read a single sentence of her poison. Yeah, I said softly. I've missed this too. Lies stacking on lies. Every second in her kitchen was a performance. I studied Harper's gestures, her expressions, the way her laughter felt rehearsed. Before, I would have brushed off those small pauses as natural. Now they looked like cracks. She asked about my work, about Maisie's school, about my mother's health. Her concern sounded genuine, but I knew better. She hates that little girl's laugh. The words haunted me, echoing louder than her voice. I nodded, gave her just enough detail to seem open, but never more. Because I understood now. Harper wasn't asking out of love. She was gathering, taking notes, the way predators circle prey before they pounce. And I wasn't prey anymore. When I finally left, notebook hidden in my coat, I felt the weight of two worlds pressing on me. One where Harper was still my best friend, the woman who once swore she'd take a bullet for me. And one where Harper was my enemy, hiding her malice behind laughter and shared memories. I drove home with shaking hands, torn between grief and rage. I wanted to cry, to mourn the friend I thought I had, but anger burned too brightly. She had turned her envy into scripture, binding it into pages. And now I would rewrite the ending of her story. The betrayal wasn't just going to be uncovered, it was going to be avenged. Slowly, precisely, like surgery. At home, Maisie ran into my arms, her little voice bubbling with joy. "Mommy, guess what? Harper said she'd take me to the zoo next week." My blood went cold. I bent down, brushing hair from her forehead, my smile trembling. "Oh honey, we'll see about that," I whispered. Inside, my chest cracked with fury. Harper wasn't just trying to replace me in her fantasies. She was drawing closer to my daughter. The thought of Harper's envy stretching its claws toward Maisie made my skin crawl. No more. I decided then. Harper would never take my daughter anywhere again. She would never get another chance to stain my child's innocence. But I couldn't cut her off outright. Not yet. If I moved too soon, she'd sense my suspicion. So I played along, nodding, hugging Maisie, while rage burned behind my smile. That night I opened the notebook again. My hands shook, but I forced myself to keep reading, every word slicing deeper. Sometimes I think she doesn't deserve what she has. If I pushed hard enough, maybe she'd break. Maybe then people would see me as the stronger one. My breath caught. The words weren't just envy, they were a threat. I saw the outlines of her intent, vague but dangerous. She wasn't content with hating me silently. She fantasized about breaking me, tearing me down until she stood in my place. My stomach churned as I imagined Harper weaving her way into my life more deeply, until one day she didn't just want to be me, she wanted me gone. I closed the notebook and pressed it to my chest, my heartbeat drumming against the leather. The betrayal had crossed into something darker than jealousy. It was obsession, dangerous and consuming. And if I didn't act carefully, it could swallow me whole. But there was power in knowledge, and for the first time I held it all. Harper didn't know I had her diary of secrets, her map of envy and intent. And if she wanted to play with masks and shadows, I would play too. But unlike her, I wasn't just writing in a notebook. I was carving my revenge in real time, with real consequences. And the first move would be silence. Silence that made her think I was still blind. Days passed, and Harper kept calling, kept showing up, weaving herself into my daily routine like she always had. But now, every conversation was a test. I let her speak, let her pour out her fake laughter, while I studied her with the eyes of a detective. I noticed how often she brought up Maisie, how her questions about my job grew sharper, almost invasive. She asked when I was scheduled to work late, when Maisie would be home alone with a babysitter, as though she were memorizing opportunities. Each time I gave vague answers, smiling, pretending to be distracted. But inside I was recording every word, every gesture. Harper thought she was hunting me, but I was building the trap, piece by piece, waiting for her to step inside. Still, there were nights when the weight crushed me. Nights when I sat in the dark, staring at Maisie's sleeping face, wondering how I could have been so blind. How could I let a woman like Harper so close for so long? The grief came in waves, pulling me under until I gasped for air. But every time I felt weak, I remembered her words. I never wanted her happiness. And the grief hardened into something sharper. Resolve. Harper had chosen her role. She wasn't my friend anymore. She was my enemy. And enemies don't get forgiveness. They get destroyed. I would let her believe she was still in control, still the puppet master. But behind my mask, I was sharpening my scissors, waiting for the strings to snap. And then, just when I thought I could keep playing my role without faltering, Harper made her move. One ordinary Wednesday evening, as I tucked Maisie into bed, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Harper. Just one line that made my blood run cold. "She looks more like me every day." My fingers froze, the phone slipping from my hand onto the carpet. My daughter stirred, mumbling in her sleep, blissfully unaware of the storm about to break. That was the moment I knew. The game wasn't slow anymore. Harper had crossed a line, and I couldn't wait much longer. Her obsession was tightening, faster than I expected. And if I didn't act soon, I might lose everything. I couldn't erase those words from my phone. "She looks more like me every day." They glowed on the screen like a curse, like Harper had carved them into my skin. I stared at the message until my eyes blurred, my pulse drumming in my ears. Maisie slept peacefully just a few feet away, unaware of how those words shattered me. I wanted to rush to Harper's house, shove her notebook in her face, and demand what she meant. But I couldn't. If she saw me unravel, she would win. So I deleted the text, locked my phone, and sat in the dark. My whole body trembled as I realized something more dangerous than betrayal was happening. Harper wasn't just writing about me anymore. She was circling closer to Maisie, pushing her obsession past the safety line. That was when I knew. Silence wasn't going to be enough. The next morning I forced myself into routine. Coffee. Packing Maisie's lunch. Dropping her at school with a smile I didn't feel. But beneath it all I was watching, calculating. Harper was at the school gates too, leaning against her silver SUV like she belonged there. She waved at me, at Maisie, her smile stretching across her face like nothing had changed. "See you after school, kiddo," she called out as Maisie ran inside. My stomach clenched. How many people thought Harper was just a loving family friend? How many saw her as harmless, generous, kind? None of them knew about the pages filled with envy, or the late-night texts that still made my skin crawl. As I drove away, I realized I was the only one who could see the cracks in Harper's mask. And if I didn't act soon, no one would believe me until it was too late. I couldn't risk confronting her directly, so I chose another path: surveillance. That afternoon, while Maisie was still in class, I parked 2 streets away from Harper's house. From the car I watched. She was in her yard, trimming roses, her hair glinting in the sunlight. She looked ordinary, almost boring, but I knew better. Every smile was a weapon. Every movement rehearsed. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I realized how easily she blended in, how easily she fooled the world. Then she pulled out her phone, glanced at it, and her smile shifted into something darker. I couldn't hear her conversation, but I didn't need to. I could see the way her shoulders straightened, the way her lips curled. She was planning something, and I was running out of time to figure out what it was. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Harper's words echoing like a drumbeat. "She looks more like me every day." Did Harper think Maisie was hers somehow? The thought churned my stomach. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Maisie, and opened the notebook again. More venom. More fantasies. If Elowen weren't here, everything would finally fall into place. I'd have the life I was meant for. My breath hitched. My fingers dug into the pages until my knuckles went white. This wasn't jealousy anymore. It was a blueprint. A vision of a life where I didn't exist, where Harper slid neatly into my place as mother, wife, woman. The air in the room felt poisonous. I pressed the book shut, knowing that if I didn't move soon, I'd be reading my own obituary between its lines. The next morning I decided to test her. Over breakfast I asked Maisie casually, "Did Harper ever say anything strange to you?" "About me." Maisie's spoon paused over her cereal. Her little brows furrowed. "Sometimes she says you're too busy, that I should spend more time with her. But she's just being nice, right?" My stomach twisted. Harper was planting seeds, weaving herself into Maisie's heart while painting me as absent. My lips trembled, but I forced a calm smile. "Of course, sweetie. Just nice." But inside, fury clawed at me. Harper was rewriting the story, one whisper at a time. She was making my daughter see her as the hero, me as the villain. And if I didn't stop it, Maisie might start believing the lies. That was the moment I realized my revenge couldn't just be about justice, it had to be about protection. I started small. Called Harper less. Declined her invitations. Put distance where once there had been none. At first she didn't react. She laughed it off, saying she knew I was busy. But then the cracks appeared. One night she showed up uninvited at my door, holding cookies. "For Maisie," she said, smiling too wide. I thanked her, but I didn't let her inside. Her eyes flicked past me, searching for Maisie, and for the first time her mask faltered. I saw the sharpness underneath, the hunger in her gaze. "You know," she said softly, "she really lights up around me. It's like she knows." I didn't ask what she meant. I just closed the door. But my hand shook for hours afterward. Harper wasn't just circling, she was pressing against the glass, waiting for it to shatter. Paranoia grew. I found myself checking the locks twice, sometimes 3 times a night. Walking Maisie to school even when she begged to ride her bike alone. Every shadow on the street felt like Harper's. Every phone call from an unknown number made my heart race. I was unraveling, and Harper could sense it. She started leaving voicemails, her voice sugary sweet. "Elowen, we should talk. Don't be a stranger. You know I'll always be here for Maisie. Always." The emphasis on always made my skin crawl. I wanted to block her number, to erase her from our lives entirely, but something told me she wouldn't stop. Blocking her would only push her into darker corners. And I needed to see her coming if I was going to win. One evening, as I tucked Maisie into bed, she asked a question that nearly broke me. "Mommy, why don't you smile at Harper anymore? Did she do something bad?" My throat tightened. I brushed her hair back and kissed her forehead. "Don't worry about that, sweetheart," I whispered. But inside I was screaming. Harper's poison was seeping into my daughter's thoughts, making her notice the fractures I tried so hard to hide. My mask was slipping, and Maisie was too young to understand the danger circling us. I left her room that night with tears burning in my eyes. Harper wasn't just stealing pieces of my life. She was trying to rewrite the bond between mother and daughter. And if I let her, I'd lose everything. But it was the next message that finally broke the glass. A white envelope slid under my door one Saturday morning. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Harper holding Maisie's hand at the school fair, both of them smiling like a mother and child. Scrawled across the back in red ink were 5 words. "She was mine first, Elowen." My breath caught. The floor tilted. My hand shook so violently I dropped the photo. Harper wasn't circling anymore. She was claiming. And that was the moment I knew. The war I'd been preparing for had begun. And this time it wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival. I stared at the photograph on my kitchen table for hours, my coffee long gone cold. The red words burned into my vision. "She was mine first, Elowen." My first instinct was to rip the photo apart, to erase the proof of Harper's madness. But then I stopped. If I destroyed it, I'd have nothing. No evidence, no leverage. For the first time, I realized Harper wasn't invincible. She had slipped. Leaving something physical meant she was reckless, desperate to rattle me. And if she was desperate, then I had power. That thought lit a spark deep inside me. For weeks I'd been reacting, afraid, defensive, cornered. But now I could flip the script. I pressed the photo flat against the table, smoothed the edges with my palm, and whispered to myself, "If she wants war, she'll get one. But it will be on my terms." The first step was to document everything. I pulled out a cheap spiral notebook and began writing. Dates, times, every strange message, every suspicious glance. I taped the photograph to the first page, staring at it until Harper's smile began to look less human and more like a mask. Then I added copies of her old notebook entries I'd scanned with my phone. Each word was evidence. Each page a weapon waiting to be used. The act of organizing her madness gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't just Elowen, the terrified mother anymore. I was building a case, brick by brick, against the woman who thought she could replace me. By the time I finished, my notebook was heavy with secrets. And for the first time I felt something sharp rising inside me. Not fear, not sorrow, but resolve. But I couldn't fight her alone. I needed an ally, someone who would believe me. I thought of my sister, Rowan. She and I hadn't been close in years. We drifted after she moved to Portland, busy with her own family. But I knew if anyone could see through Harper's perfect act, it was Rowan. That night I called her. My voice shook as I told her everything. The notebook, the text messages, the photograph. There was a long pause, and I braced myself for disbelief. But then she said, "Elowen, she's dangerous. You can't let this go." Relief flooded me, tears pricking my eyes. For the first time, someone else carried the weight of my fear. Rowan promised to drive down that weekend. "We'll figure this out together," she said. And in that moment, I realized Harper wasn't expecting me to fight back with reinforcements. Still, I had to play smart. If Harper sensed I was onto her, she'd retreat into the shadows again, where I couldn't track her. So I decided to set a trap. At school pickup, I forced myself to smile when she waved. I even walked over, asking about her roses like nothing had happened. Her eyes lit up, and for a moment, I saw the relief in her face. She thought I was breaking. She thought her little games had worked. I laughed at her jokes, nodded at her lies, and pretended not to notice when her gaze drifted hungrily to Maisie. It took every ounce of strength I had not to scream. But inside I was recording every word, every glance. Harper thought she had me wrapped around her finger. She had no idea I was baiting her closer to the fire. That night, as Maisie slept, I rehearsed conversations in my head. What would I say if Harper slipped again? How would I twist her words into confessions? I practiced my expressions in the mirror. Amused, surprised, concerned, but never angry. Harper needed to believe I was softening, letting her back in. Because only then would she reveal more of herself. My reflection didn't look like me anymore. It looked harder, sharper, like a woman who had already been through the flames and was ready to strike. I almost didn't recognize the determination in my own eyes. Harper thought she was scripting this story. But she hadn't realized I'd started writing my own ending. The next day she made her move. She showed up at the coffee shop I always stopped at after drop-off, sliding into the seat across from me without asking. "Elowen," she said warmly, "we shouldn't let silly things get between us. You and I, we're family really." My throat tightened, but I forced a smile. "Of course," I replied. "Maisie loves you." Harper's eyes gleamed at that. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Sometimes I think she was meant for me, you know? Like she feels it too." My blood turned to ice, but I didn't flinch. I only sipped my coffee and said, "That's sweet of you, Harper." Inside though, I was screaming. She had crossed the line from envy into delusion, and now I had her words tucked safely in my memory. Another brick for the case. When Rowan arrived that weekend, I showed her everything. The notebook, the photo, my own notes. She sat at my dining table, her lips pressed tight, her eyes blazing. "This is obsession," she said finally. "She's not just jealous, Elle. She's rewriting reality." Hearing it from someone else made it more real, more terrifying. But it also gave me strength. Together we made a plan. Gather more evidence, push Harper until she slipped again, and then use it to crush her reputation in the community she prized so much. Rowan leaned in close, her voice low. "We won't just stop her, Elle. We'll destroy her. She'll wish she never even looked at you." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't drowning. I felt like I had an army, even if it was just the two of us. But Harper wasn't slowing down. The more I pretended to let her in, the bolder she became. She started texting me photos of Maisie she'd taken at school events, ones I hadn't even known were snapped. She sent long messages late at night about how much Maisie needed her stability. She even hinted that I was too fragile, too broken to raise a child on my own. Each message was a dagger, but I didn't block her. Instead, I saved them all. Every cruel word was another nail in the coffin I was building for her. And yet, with every step I took, the danger grew. Harper wasn't a fool. She'd notice soon that I wasn't unraveling anymore, that I was preparing for something. I just had to move faster than her instincts. And then, the crack I'd been waiting for appeared. One night, after Maisie fell asleep, I found another envelope under my door. Inside was not a photo this time, but a handwritten note. You don't deserve her. I've been patient, but my patience is gone. When the time is right, you'll see what real motherhood looks like. My hand shook as I read the words, bile rising in my throat. But beneath the terror, I felt a surge of triumph. Harper had finally put her madness in writing. Proof. Evidence no one could ignore. I pressed the note flat beside the photograph, my heart pounding. The trap was closing, and she didn't even know it. But as I stared at the threatening words, I couldn't shake one thought. If the time is right. When is that? And what exactly was Harper planning to do? The note sat on my kitchen counter like a bomb, its words seared into my mind. When the time is right. Those 5 words haunted me more than anything Harper had ever done. What time? Or plan? I slept little that night, my ears straining for the sound of footsteps, my body trembling at every creak of the house. I imagined her slipping through the shadows, watching me from the trees outside. Fear should have paralyzed me, but instead it fueled me. Every line of her handwriting was proof, every curl of her letters a weapon. I texted Rowan a photo of the note. She called within minutes, her voice sharp. Elowen, she's escalating. This isn't just about obsession anymore. She's warning you. I swallowed hard. Then she's making her biggest mistake, I whispered, gripping the paper tighter. Because she doesn't know she just handed me the rope to hang her. The next morning, I walked into Maisie's school like nothing was wrong. My chest felt hollow, but I smiled at the teachers, waved at other parents, and kept my mask firmly in place. Harper was there, of course, perched by the fence like a queen surveying her court. She beamed when she saw me, and I forced myself to beam back. Morning, Harper, I called, my voice steady. She walked over, her perfume too sweet, her smile too wide. I was hoping we could chat, she said softly, almost conspiratorially. My stomach turned, but I nodded. Of course. Coffee later. Her eyes sparkled, and she squeezed my arm gently. Perfect. Inside my skin crawled. But I needed her close. I needed her to feel safe enough to keep slipping. This wasn't just survival anymore, it was strategy. Rowan arrived at my house that afternoon. A storm of determination. She spread out the evidence on my table. The photos, the messages, the threatening note. We need someone else to see this, she insisted. A lawyer, maybe even the police. I hesitated. If we go too soon, she'll deny everything. She's smart, Rowan. She knows how to play innocent. Rowan leaned forward, her eyes blazing. Then we make her overplay her hand. We push her until she exposes herself completely. Her words settled into me like a seed. That was the way. I didn't just want Harper to stop. I wanted to destroy the perfect mask she wore in front of everyone. I wanted the whole town to see her for what she really was. That night, Harper texted again. This time it wasn't threats, it was pictures. Maisie at recess, Maisie walking to class, Maisie laughing with her friends. Each photo was taken from a distance, from angles that made my skin crawl. I stared at the images until tears blurred my vision. She's stalking my daughter, I whispered to Rowan, who sat stiffly beside me. Rowan clenched her fists. Then we stalk her back. It was reckless, but the idea sparked something inside me. Harper thought she was the hunter, but maybe it was time she realized she wasn't the only one watching. Maybe it was time she felt eyes on her too. The next day, Rowan and I parked across the street from Harper's house. It was a charming suburban home with roses blooming under her windows, her husband's truck in the driveway, her children's bikes scattered on the lawn. On the surface it was perfect. Too perfect. Rowan lifted her camera, snapping pictures as Harper emerged, perfectly dressed even just to water her plants. "Look at her," Rowan muttered. "Like she's in a magazine spread." But when Harper glanced up, I saw something flicker in her eyes. A shadow, a crack in the mask. She lingered by her roses too long, clutching the hose as though her thoughts were miles away. For the first time, I wondered if her obsession wasn't just dangerous. It was eating her alive. And maybe, just maybe, I could use that. When I met her for coffee later that week, I leaned into the performance. "You're such a good friend, Harper," I said, my voice warm. "Maisie adores you." Harper's lips curved, but her eyes sharpened. "She tells me things, you know," she said softly. "Things she doesn't tell you." My stomach clenched, but I smiled. "Of course she does. That's natural." Harper tilted her head, studying me. "You're stronger than I thought, Elowen. Most mothers would have broken by now." The words were meant as a compliment, but they dripped with challenge. I laughed lightly, hiding the storm inside me. "Maybe I'm not as fragile as you think." And for the briefest second, Harper's smile faltered. Tiny slip. Tiny victory. Rowan pushed me harder. "You need to record her. Catch her words, her tone. Something undeniable." The thought terrified me, but it made sense. So the next time Harper and I met, I slipped my phone into my pocket, recording every second. We chatted about school, about gardening, about meaningless things. And then, almost casually, Harper leaned in. "If Maisie were mine, she'd never feel alone. I'd give her everything. More than you can." My heart pounded, but my face stayed calm. "That's a lot to promise," I replied softly. Harper smiled, dreamy, almost feverish. "She deserves better." The words burned into my phone, permanent and undeniable. When I played it back for Rowan later, she stared at me in silence, her face pale. "This isn't obsession anymore," she whispered. "This is a threat." That night I couldn't sleep. I stood by Maisie's door, listening to her steady breathing, watching her chest rise and fall. She was my world, my heart, my reason for breathing. And Harper wanted to take that from me. Well, not just take it, she wanted to be me. The thought chilled me to the bone. I pressed my hand against the doorframe, promising myself silently. Harper would not win. She could whisper lies, snap photos, write threats, but she would never take my daughter. She underestimated me, mistaking my fear for weakness. But fear can harden into steel. And mine had already begun to sharpen into something far more dangerous. Vengeance. The following week, Harper escalated again. She showed up at Maisie's soccer practice, standing on the sidelines as though she belonged there. When I confronted her, she smiled sweetly, her words syrupy. "I'm just supporting her. Isn't that what good friends do?" Parents around us smiled politely, seeing nothing but kindness. But when Harper leaned close, her whisper cut like glass. "She looks more like me every day, don't you think?" My nails dug into my palms, my vision blurring with rage. But I didn't lash out. Not yet. Because in that moment I realized something. Harper wasn't invincible. She was unraveling inch by inch, right in front of everyone. And if I played my cards right, I could be the one to pull the final thread. The unraveling came faster than I expected. A few nights later, as Rowan and I sorted through the evidence, Maisie screamed from her bedroom. I bolted upstairs, heart hammering, and found her pointing to the window. "Mom! Someone was there!" she cried, trembling. I rushed to the glass, yanking the curtains aside. At first, I saw nothing but the dark street. But then a shadow moved, a figure slipping away into the night. My blood froze. Harper. She wasn't threatening anymore. She was here, watching, hunting. And suddenly, every piece of evidence felt meaningless. Because Harper wasn't waiting for the right time anymore. She was making her move. And my daughter was the prize. The moment Maisie screamed, something inside me snapped. No more hiding. No more waiting for Harper to dictate the pace of this twisted game. She had stepped over the final line, and I could no longer afford to simply collect evidence or whisper plans with Rowan. I held Maisie tightly until her sobs slowed, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. But one thing I knew with certainty. Harper had made a fatal mistake by entering the sanctity of my home, even from outside the window. It was a declaration of war, and I was no longer afraid. I tucked Maisie back into bed, kissed her forehead, and as I pulled the blanket around her shoulders, I silently swore that no matter what it cost, no matter how dangerous it became, Harper would never breathe down our necks again. The next morning, Rowan met me at the kitchen table, her eyes blazing with the same fury I felt. "We can't just react anymore," she said firmly, pushing a notebook toward me. "We need a plan." I flipped through the pages, my heart racing at the strategies she had scribbled down. Surveillance cameras, allies to gather, legal steps, even traps to lure Harper out. "She thrives in the shadows," Rowan continued. "We drag her into the light." For the first time in weeks, hope sparked in my chest. We weren't powerless. "Then we make her misstep," I said, my voice steady. Rowan smiled grimly. "Exactly. But you'll have to play her game better than she does." And I realized then I was ready. We started by installing cameras around the house. Tiny black eyes watched the windows, the driveway, the backyard where Maisie once played carefree. Maisie asked why, her wide eyes brimming with fear. "Because Mama wants to keep you safe," I told her, my voice soothing. Inside, though, it felt like we were turning our home into a fortress. That night, as I watched the feeds from my phone, I half expected Harper's face to appear in the glow of the infrared. My hands trembled, but a strange calm filled me too. For once, I was the one watching. Harper might not know it yet, but the power was shifting. She had stalked us, photographed us, whispered her poison, but now I was the one recording her every move. And when the time came, I'd use it to burn her mask to ash. Rowan's next idea was bold, almost reckless. "We should bait her," she said, her eyes glittering. "Give her opportunities to slip, to say or do something she can't take back." First I recoiled. The thought of drawing Harper closer felt like inviting a snake into my bed. But Rowan was right. Harper already believed Maisie was drifting toward her. So why not let her believe it even more? "If she thinks I'm weakening, she'll push harder," I murmured. Rowan nodded. "And the harder she pushes, the easier she is to catch." My stomach nodded, but I agreed. It was terrifying. But if I wanted Harper destroyed, I had to let her think she was winning. So I played my part. I let Harper pick Maisie up after school once or twice, always watching from a distance, my phone recording every smile and every overstepped boundary. Harper glowed during those moments, her hands brushing Maisie's hair back, her laugh too bright, her eyes flicking to me as though daring me to stop her. And though every muscle in my body screamed to rip Maisie away, I didn't. I forced myself to wait. To let Harper believe her fantasy was becoming reality. Each time she touched Maisie's shoulder or whispered something too close, I imagined the day I'd show the world those recordings. The day I'd reveal Harper as the predator she truly was. And that thought was the only thing that kept me from breaking. One evening, after Harper dropped Maisie off, she lingered at my door. "You know," she said softly, "we could make this easier. You don't have to fight me." My jaw clenched. "What are you talking about?" She smiled sweetly, her hand brushing the doorframe. "You're exhausted, Elowen. Maisie needs someone who can give her everything. Why not let me help?" Rage surged through me, but I swallowed it. "I'll think about it," I lied, my voice honeyed. Harper's eyes glowed like a predator sensing blood. That's all I wanted to hear. As she walked away, I collapsed against the door, trembling. Rowan was right. She was overplaying her hand now. And soon, her mask would shatter beyond repair. But Harper wasn't the only one changing. I could feel something hardening inside me, something sharp and merciless. The woman who once trembled at shadows was gone. In her place stood someone colder, someone willing to fight fire with fire. I no longer flinched at Harper's words. I studied them, dissected them, waited for the moment they'd hang her. I no longer lost sleep to her threats. I dreamed of the day I'd watch her world burn. Even Maisie sensed the shift. "You're different, Mom," she said softly one night, her small hand in mine. "Stronger." I kissed her head, holding back tears. "Because of you," I whispered. She didn't need to know that strength was forged in the fire of rage, or that the flames were only growing. Rowan and I began preparing evidence for the authorities. We created files, timelines, recordings, an entire archive of Harper's descent. But Rowan warned me again and again. "She's cunning. If we push too soon, she'll slip away clean. We need her cornered." So we waited, tightening the net inch by inch. But Harper seemed to sense the storm brewing. She began appearing more often. At soccer games, at the grocery store, even once outside Maisie's dance class. Always smiling, always playing the perfect friend. And each time, she whispered something only I could hear. "She's mine. You'll lose. When the time comes, you'll understand." I held my ground, but inside, the fury burned hotter than ever. Then came the night everything tilted. The cameras caught her. Harper standing in my driveway at midnight, her face tilted toward Maisie's window. She stood there for nearly 10 minutes, unmoving, her silhouette bathed in eerie streetlight. Watching. Waiting. When I showed Rowan the footage, her face went pale. "This is it," she whispered. "This is enough to end her." But something in me disagreed. It wasn't enough. I didn't just want Harper stopped. I wanted her destroyed. I wanted her stripped of her mask, her lies torn open in front of everyone she had fooled. And for that I had to let her keep going, even if it meant risking everything. The risk came sooner than I expected. The next afternoon, Maisie wasn't at the pickup spot after school. My chest caved in as I searched frantically, my eyes darting across the crowd. And then I saw her. Harper, holding Maisie's hand, leading her toward the parking lot. My blood ran cold. She hadn't asked. She hadn't told me. She was just taking her. I sprinted across the blacktop, my heart pounding in my ears, every instinct screaming that this was it. The moment I had dreaded, the moment everything came crashing down. And as Harper turned, smiling as though she had done nothing wrong, I realized with bone-deep certainty. The war had finally reached its breaking point. I woke up the next morning with a heaviness pressing against my chest, the kind you feel when you know you can't run anymore. For weeks, I had been collecting pieces of truth, but now those pieces were jagged glass cutting into my heart. The notebook lay on my nightstand, its presence louder than my alarm clock, louder than my pounding guilt. I had read the words so many times they etched into me like scars. "He says he'll leave her soon." That one line was a knife. Caleb's promise to Isla, my best friend, written in her neat cursive, mocking me. My eyes burned, but the tears refused to fall. They had dried up the day I realized betrayal wasn't just an accident. It was a choice. And Caleb and Isla had chosen it, over and over, while looking me in the eye. I didn't eat breakfast, just grabbed my keys and drove, my car running on fumes of anger instead of gas. The small town streets of Cedar Pines blurred by me. Coffee shops opening, neighbors waving, people going about their lives like the world wasn't caving in. I wanted to scream out the window, tell them everything. My husband is a liar. My best friend is a thief of souls. But instead, I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My destination wasn't planned. My instincts just carried me, block after block, until I realized where I was headed. Isla's Street. Her little blue house with the white shutters, the one I had helped her paint last spring. The sight of it made my stomach twist. I parked a few houses down, my heart beating so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. My plan wasn't clear, but rage made everything seem simple. I could march up to her door, shove the notebook in her face, and demand answers. But as I sat there watching her mailbox sway gently in the breeze, I saw her. Isla, standing in her driveway, laughing on the phone. Her head tilted back, her curls bouncing in the sunlight. She looked carefree, untouched by guilt, as if the lies she'd written in that notebook were just doodles. I wanted to hate her with every fiber of my being, but a part of me still remembered the girl who braided my hair before prom, who held my hand when my mother died. That girl was gone. When Isla noticed my car, her smile faltered and her body stiffened. She said something quickly into the phone and slipped it into her pocket. Our eyes locked across the driveway. Hers widened, a flicker of guilt flashing through them, but then she composed herself. She gave me a small wave like nothing had changed, like she hadn't ripped my life apart. My chest burned with words I wanted to scream, but none came out. Instead, I turned the ignition and drove away, leaving her standing there, probably wondering how much I knew. The silence between us was louder than any fight. I didn't go home. I drove to the park instead, the one Caleb and I used to take Sunday walks in when we still pretended to be happy. I parked under an oak tree, killed the engine, and sat there, shaking. I pulled out the notebook again, flipping to the page where Isla had written. He says he feels trapped. He says she doesn't understand him like I do. My vision blurred. Every word felt like a branding iron on my skin. I could almost hear Caleb's voice in those words, whispering lies that once made me feel special. Now they were recycled lines, handed to her. I clenched the notebook so hard its spine cracked. That betrayal was real, permanent. That evening I confronted Caleb, not with screams but with silence. He came home late, smelling faintly of cologne he hadn't worn in years. He kissed my cheek absent-mindedly, as if routine could erase the truth. I sat at the kitchen table with the notebook in front of me, my hands folded neatly on top of it. "What's that?" he asked, his voice casual. I didn't answer. I just pushed the notebook toward him, watching as his face drained of color. He flipped through the pages quickly, then slower, his hands trembling. "Where did you?" His voice cracked. I tilted my head. "You tell me." The silence that followed was heavier than any confession he could have given. Caleb tried to explain. Something about confusion, about feeling lost, about how he never meant to fall into Isla's arms. But the excuses tangled in his throat, choking him. "Do you love her?" I asked finally, my voice steady though my insides were quaking. He opened his mouth, closed it, then whispered, "I don't know." That was worse than a yes, because it meant he had once loved her enough to risk everything, but not enough to choose her completely. I sat there, staring at the man I had built a life with, and realized I didn't recognize him anymore. He wasn't Caleb, my husband. He was Caleb, the betrayer. The rest of the night passed in fragments. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I moved like a ghost through the house, brushing my teeth, folding laundry, setting out plates for tomorrow's breakfast. Meanwhile, Caleb followed me around like a shadow, muttering apologies that bounced off me like rubber bullets. Every word he said felt rehearsed, like lines from a script meant to pacify. I wondered if he had rehearsed those lines in Isla's bed too. I wondered how many times he had thought of me while touching her, or if I had disappeared completely in those moments. That thought nearly made me collapse. When I finally climbed into bed, I turned my back to him. The distance between us felt like a canyon. He reached for me once, his fingers brushing my arm, but I pulled away. I stared into the darkness, my chest hollow but my mind sharp. For the first time in weeks, my anger cooled into clarity. If Caleb and Isla had chosen betrayal, then I had to choose something stronger, revenge. Not the kind that left me bitter and broken, but the kind that rebuilt me from the ashes. I wasn't going to let them write the end of my story. I would write it myself. But before I could decide what revenge would look like, I had to face the ugliest truth of all. I still loved him, somewhere deep down in the corners of my shattered heart. And that love was poison. It was the tether keeping me from cutting him loose. That realization stole my sleep and left me staring at the ceiling until dawn. Tomorrow, I told myself, would be the beginning of something new. Tomorrow I would stop being the victim. Tomorrow I would learn how to become the villain in their story, instead of the casualty in mine. The morning light crept into my room like an unwelcome guest, scattering across the sheets where Caleb used to lay so peacefully. He had left early, or maybe he hadn't come back at all. I didn't bother checking. Instead, I sat at my vanity, staring at my reflection. My face looked older, harder, like betrayal had carved new lines into me overnight. For weeks I had been the prey, cornered and wounded, but staring at myself now, I saw something shift. I wasn't prey anymore. I was the hunter. And hunters don't waste time mourning. They set traps. My fingers grazed the notebook still resting on the nightstand, its pages a loaded weapon. Isla's handwriting, her confessions, her fantasies, they weren't just secrets. They were leverage. And leverage was power, something I had forgotten I had. The question wasn't if I would use it. The question was how. I started with silence. Caleb hated silence. It was louder than any fight. I ignored his texts, his missed calls, his desperate attempts to act like the night before hadn't happened. By lunchtime he came home, sweat on his forehead, his smile forced. "We need to talk," he said, standing in the kitchen doorway like a schoolboy waiting for punishment. I set down my coffee cup slowly, meeting his gaze with an expression I had perfected in the mirror that morning. Cold, unreadable, untouchable. "We don't need to talk," I said softly. "You need to decide." His brow furrowed. "Decide what?" My lips curved into a smile that wasn't really a smile. "If you're leaving me, or if you're leaving her." The silence that followed was almost delicious, watching him choke on the truth he had tried to bury. He mumbled something about confusion again, about not wanting to hurt anyone. I laughed, an ugly raw laugh that startled even me. "You already hurt me, Caleb. You tore me open and handed my heart to her. The question isn't about hurting. It's about choosing." He rubbed his face, pacing the room like a caged animal. "It's not that simple." I leaned back in my chair. "It is." I wanted him to sweat, to feel every ounce of the pressure I had been drowning under. But deep down, I knew men like him rarely made hard choices. They waited for women to decide for them, so they could play victim later. That's when I realized, if I wanted revenge, I couldn't wait for him to crumble. I had to build the collapse myself. That night I drove back to Isla Street, but I didn't stop. I parked at the gas station across from her neighborhood, watching as lights flicked on in her house. I imagined her inside, sipping wine, maybe writing in another notebook about her dreams of a future with my husband. The thought almost made me laugh again. What she didn't know was that her first notebook had already betrayed her. I thought about walking up to her door, dropping it in her mailbox, and letting her live in terror wondering when I'd expose her. But no, that wasn't enough. Revenge wasn't about speed, it was about precision. And precision meant patience. I tucked the notebook into my purse, already forming a plan that made my pulse quicken. She had written her sins in ink. I would turn that ink into fire. The next day I paid a visit to a local print shop. The owner, an older man with kind eyes, didn't ask questions when I handed him scanned pages and asked for multiple copies. "Working on a project?" he asked with a smile. "Something like that," I replied. The sound of the printer spitting out Isla's words was almost euphoric. When he handed me the stack, neatly bound, my fingers trembled with anticipation. I thanked him, slid the copies into my tote, and walked out of that shop a different woman. No longer broken. No longer powerless. I had in my hands the key to destroying her reputation, her friendships, and every ounce of trust she had left in this town. She had written her betrayal in her own hand. I was simply giving her the stage to perform it publicly. Back at home, Caleb was waiting. He sat on the couch with his head in his hands, as though the weight of his lies had finally started to crush him. "We can fix this," he whispered as I walked past. I paused, tilting my head, studying him. "Fix what?" he asked. His eyes met mine, glassy with tears. "I'll do whatever it takes." My lips parted in mock sympathy. "You mean like not sleeping with my best friend?" His face twisted in pain, and for a moment I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered Isla's smile, the way Caleb's voice softened when he said her name, and the pity evaporated. "You've already done enough," I said. Then I went upstairs, leaving him to sit in the wreckage of his choices. Every tear he shed was a small victory. For the next week I lived two lives. In one, I was the quiet, distant wife, barely acknowledging Caleb, speaking only when necessary. In the other I was the architect of destruction, carefully planning each move, each reveal. I didn't want to simply expose them. I wanted to shatter them. I started small, slipping one copy of the notebook pages into Isla's mailbox. No note attached. I imagined her finding it, her hands trembling, her mind spinning. Would she think Caleb had betrayed her? Would she suspect me? Either way, the fear would eat at her, gnawing like a rat at the edges of her peace. That was only the beginning. I still had a dozen more copies and a dozen more ideas. Revenge wasn't a sprint. It was a marathon. And I was just getting started. The cracks began to show quickly. Isla stopped posting her cheerful updates online. Her car wasn't in her driveway as often. I saw her once at the grocery store, and she looked pale, her hair unkempt, her smile forced. I walked right past her, pretending not to notice, though inside I was savoring every second. Caleb, too, grew more desperate, more nervous. He tried to cook dinner, clean the house, leave little notes on my pillow. All of it felt pathetic, like a child trying to glue together a vase he had smashed into pieces. And every night, I slept with the copies of the notebook hidden in my closet, knowing the real storm hadn't even hit yet. I was holding thunder in my hands, waiting for the perfect moment to strike lightning. But even as I planned, a question lingered in the corners of my mind. How far was I willing to go? Revenge has a taste that can become addictive. Each small win left me hungry for more. But I also knew that revenge, if left unchecked, could consume me completely. Late at night, staring at the ceiling, I wondered if I was becoming just like them. Selfish, deceitful, cruel. Then I remembered the nights I cried myself to sleep, the mornings I painted on a fake smile, the years of loyalty they had stolen from me. No, I wasn't like them. My revenge wasn't about selfish desire. It was about justice, about balance. They had written this story when they betrayed me. I was just giving it the ending it deserved. And so I made a vow to myself as I drifted into sleep that night. I would finish what they started. I would burn down the world they built together and walk away from the ashes stronger than ever. They thought I was broken. They thought I was blind. But they had no idea who they had created. This wasn't about a notebook anymore. This was about rewriting my life with a pen dipped in fire. And when the flames finally rose, Caleb and Isla would be standing in the center, choking on the smoke of their own lies. The day I chose to strike felt almost too ordinary, which made it perfect. A crisp Saturday morning, the town buzzing with its usual weekend rituals. Farmers' market stalls, kids on bikes, old men sipping coffee outside diners. Ordinary days disguise extraordinary explosions. And mine would be no different. I stuffed half a dozen bound copies of Isla's notebook pages into my tote bag, my heart pounding not with fear but with purpose. These weren't just words anymore. They were bombs waiting to detonate. I had already tested the edges of her paranoia, leaving her rattled and unsure. Now it was time to make her world collapse completely. I wasn't just going to expose her to Caleb. I was going to strip away the mask she wore in front of the whole community. Betrayal had been private. Revenge would be public. I started with the church bulletin board. Every week, members of our small town pinned announcements, bake sales, car washes, prayer meetings. It was a symbol of trust, a gathering place of information. I slipped one copy of Isla's words under the layer of flyers, the bold ink of her confessions pressed against announcements of pancake breakfasts and charity drives. Anyone stopping to read would see it. My hands didn't tremble as I pinned it in place. Instead, a strange calm washed over me, like I was finally stepping into the role life had forced upon me. From there I moved to the coffee shop. I tucked another copy between the pages of the free local newspaper stacked by the door. Small town gossip spreads faster than wildfire. By the time someone found it, it would be all over. By midday, I had left 3 more copies in places I knew Isla frequented. The library, the salon, and even the community center where she volunteered. Every deposit was deliberate, each one designed to maximize exposure and shame. It wasn't about ruining her in secret anymore. It was about tearing away her shield so the world could see the truth. The perfect friend, the beloved neighbor, was nothing more than a liar and a thief. With each drop, I felt a weight lifting off my chest, the suffocating pain of betrayal replaced by the electric thrill of control. For the first time in months, I was the one writing the story, not just reacting to it. And I intended to write it in bold, permanent strokes. By late afternoon, whispers began to spread. My phone buzzed with messages. Friends asking if I'd heard what people were saying about Isla, neighbors speculating if the rumors were true. I played dumb, of course, responding with feigned confusion or polite dismissal. But inside I savored it. I could almost picture Isla's face as she realized her private fantasies, written so naively in that notebook, were now being dissected by the entire town. The guilt, panic, the shame. She had stolen my husband and shattered my trust, and now she would know what it felt like to have the world turn its back on her. Justice wasn't quiet. Justice echoed. And I made sure hers would echo until she couldn't breathe. It didn't take long before Caleb came storming into the house. His face pale and twisted. "What did you do?" he demanded, his voice breaking. I sat calmly at the kitchen table, sipping tea, as if I had been waiting for this moment all day. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied smoothly, though the gleam in my eye betrayed the lie. He slammed his fist against the table, rattling the cup. "Her life is ruined, Evelyn. People are talking she can't even leave her house without." He stopped, choking on his words. I tilted my head, pretending to consider. "Sounds familiar," I said softly. "You two ruined my life first. Funny how tables turn, isn't it?" His silence was my victory. A silence thick with the weight of his guilt and my power. That night, Isla showed up at my door. Her hair was disheveled, mascara streaked across her cheeks, her eyes wide with fury and fear. "How could you?" she hissed, her voice trembling. I didn't flinch. I let her rage pour out, let her spit accusations and pleas in equal measure. When she finally fell silent, panting like a wounded animal, I leaned against the doorframe and whispered, "You wrote the words, Isla. All I did was make sure people read them." Her face crumbled, and for a moment I almost felt sorry. But then I remembered every moment of betrayal, every smile she gave me while she secretly stole what was mine. No sympathy was wasted on her. This was the consequence of her choices. This was the justice she had earned. In the days that followed, Isla disappeared. She stopped showing up at the salon, quit her shifts at the community center, and abandoned her social media entirely. The vibrant woman who once strutted through town with her head high was now a ghost, hiding from the whispers and the stares. Caleb grew quieter too, retreating into himself as though he didn't recognize the woman I had become. But that was the irony, he had created me. They both had. Betrayal had broken me down, but revenge had built me back up into someone stronger, sharper, and unafraid. They wanted me weak. Instead, I stood taller than ever, watching as the two of them drowned in the very storm they had conjured. Still late at night, when the house was silent and the echoes of my actions settled into the dark, questions clawed at me. Had I gone too far? Was this victory, or was it just another form of destruction? I would trace the lines of my reflection in the bathroom mirror, wondering if the woman staring back was someone I could live with. But then I remembered the pain of that first discovery, the words scrawled in Isla's notebook, the look in Caleb's eyes when he confessed, and I knew. This wasn't cruelty. This was survival. I had done what I needed to do to reclaim my life. The cost didn't matter. Only the result did. The town moved on eventually, as towns always do, but the scars remained. Isla became a recluse, her name spoken in hushed tones, her reputation forever stained. Caleb stayed, though our marriage was a fragile shell of what it once had been. He cooked, he cleaned, he begged for forgiveness, but I never gave it. He had made his choice when he betrayed me. My choice was to never forget. And so we lived, two strangers sharing a house, bound not by love but by the ruins of it. And me. I carried on, not broken, not defeated, but forged into something new. Revenge hadn't healed me, but it had given me strength, and that strength was mine to keep. As I closed the last hidden copy of Isla's notebook in the drawer where I kept my secrets, I smiled to myself. The war was over, but the lesson remained. Betrayal writes its own ending. All I did was hold the pen. Weeks after Isla vanished from sight, the town had shifted back into its rhythm, but for me, nothing felt ordinary. I would walk past the church bulletin board or the coffee shop, and my eyes would trace the places where I had left her words. Empty now, yet alive in memory. I carried them like ghosts, each copy still whispering to me from the shadows. My revenge had done its work. Isla was gone, Caleb was broken, and my name remained unscathed. Yet I couldn't deny the hollowness that followed victory. Sometimes silence weighs more than screams, and mine pressed down like stone. I thought about her notebook, those scribbles of secrets, and realized they had reshaped my entire life. The question that haunted me was simple. Had I destroyed her, or had I destroyed myself too? Caleb tried, in his broken way, to patch together what was left of us. He cooked dinner, left flowers on the counter, even fixed the squeaky porch swing I had once loved. But none of it mattered. When I looked at him, I didn't see my husband. I saw the man who had chosen someone else, who had looked me in the eye and betrayed me. His efforts were like paint on rotting wood, pretty on the surface but useless against decay. I knew our marriage was not alive anymore, just surviving on breath and habit. And I had no desire to resuscitate what was gone. The notebook had revealed Isla's betrayal, but Caleb's silence, his complicity, had revealed his own. And I could not forgive either of them. One evening, I opened Isla's notebook again, my hands tracing the torn edges and smudged ink. I had kept it hidden, tucked away like a relic, but tonight I needed to see it with new eyes. As I read, I realized something I had missed before. Her words were not just confessions but attempts to rewrite her own pain. She wrote because she was lonely, because Caleb gave her what I couldn't, because she thought betrayal would fill the cracks inside her. It didn't excuse her, not for a second, but it revealed the pathetic truth. Isla hadn't been stronger than me. She had been weaker. And Caleb had chosen weakness over loyalty. The clarity hit me like a wave. My revenge wasn't just about exposing them. It was about proving to myself that I was never the fragile one. They were. The next morning, I packed Caleb's things into boxes. Shirts, shoes, his watch I once bought him for Christmas. It all went neatly into cardboard and tape. When he walked into the room and saw, his face collapsed. "Please, Evelyn," he whispered, his voice low and desperate. "Don't do this." But I was done listening to please. "You broke us long before I did," I replied, my voice steady as glass. He begged, he cried, but I didn't bend. For too long, I had lived in the wreckage of their choices. It was time to rebuild my own life from the ground up. And that meant Caleb had no place in it. The man who once promised forever was nothing but a reminder of betrayal. I refused to let betrayal live under my roof anymore. Word of Isla's downfall lingered in whispers, but slowly people stopped talking. Time dulls even the sharpest scandals. I knew she had moved out of town, fleeing to escape the stares. Some said she went to live with an aunt in Florida. Others claimed she was hiding under a new name in some small city where nobody knew her face. Wherever she was far from me, and that was enough. I didn't need to see her ruin to know it existed. My revenge had worked too well, and she would never rise from it. And oddly enough, I felt no joy in that thought anymore. Only peace. She was gone and I was free. That was all I had ever wanted. Still, nights carried their own ghosts. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if revenge had carved too deeply into me. Had I become like Isla, rewriting my pain into destruction? Some nights the answer felt like yes. But other nights I saw it differently. Isla betrayed me in secret. I had answered in light. I had shown her for what she was, stripped her of her mask, and in doing so reclaimed myself. Justice always costs something, and maybe I had paid with a piece of my softness. But perhaps that was the price of survival. I no longer craved being soft. I craved being strong, unshakable, untouchable. Life began to take on a new shape. I started teaching art classes at the community center, rediscovering the passion I had buried beneath marriage and betrayal. Painting gave me something revenge never could. Creation. The brush in my hand felt like control, but a gentler kind. Parents brought their children, lonely women came for distraction, and I found myself building something beyond anger. Slowly, I was becoming more than the woman who had been betrayed. I was becoming the woman who endured, who transformed. And that, I realized, was the truest revenge of all. To live, to thrive, to rise above the ashes they left behind. One afternoon while cleaning out the attic, I stumbled on a shoebox filled with old photos. Me and Isla, smiling at summer fairs, blowing candles on birthdays, holding hands at graduations. My throat tightened as I flipped through them. For a moment, grief surged. Grief not for what she had done, but for what we had lost. A friendship that had been pure once, before desire and weakness had corroded it. I placed the box back on the shelf and whispered into the empty attic. You could have had all of this forever, Isla. But you destroyed it. And as I walked down the creaky stairs, I felt lighter. The past was a weight I no longer had to carry. Months later, standing on my porch, I watched the sunset paint the sky in gold and crimson. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. No lies, no secrets, no notebook full of betrayal hanging over me. Just me, stronger and steadier, walking forward without fear. Caleb was gone. Isla was gone. But Evelyn remained. And Evelyn was enough. My story had been scarred by betrayal, but it ended in survival. And survival, I realized, is its own kind of victory. The notebook that once nearly broke me had instead become my proof. Proof that I could endure anything. Proof that betrayal is not the end. It is only the beginning of something new. So if you're watching this, if you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever felt like revenge is your only choice, remember this. Your greatest power isn't in what you destroy, but in what you become after. Don't let betrayal define you. Let it refine you. My best friend's notebook revealed a betrayal I never saw coming, but in the end, it revealed something else too. My own strength. And if my story moved you, if it reminded you of your own battles, then stay with me. Subscribe, join this journey, and together let's turn heartbreak into power.